Welcome to Compassionate Conversations, where we push the boundaries of comfort to empower you to become all that you dream of being. Hi, I'm Esther Kane. I'm a Canadian psychotherapist and the author of It's Not About the Food, A Woman's Guide to Making Peace with Food and Our Bodies. For over 25 years, I've been helping people to overcome problematic relationships to food and their body image. And to my great delight, my book has helped thousands of people to do just that. I decided to do this series where I interview other body image warriors who I respect and love their work in order to help us form more of a community around talking about our disordered relationship with food and our bodies, in the hopes that we will find strength in each other's stories and share some really helpful tools and methods that you can use in order to heal your relationship with food and how you see your body. If you're thinking, I don't know if I have an eating disorder, so maybe these videos won't be meaningful to me, please give it a chance. When I tell people, for example, that I'm an eating disorder therapist, people automatically think eating disorders are just anorexia and bulimia. And while I treat those issues in my practice, the bulk of my clients tend to fall into the category of emotional eating. People who eat when they're mad, sad, glad, and fearful. There's all kinds of reasons that we turn to food. And they are usually the people that are yo-yo dieters, that do obsessive exercising. Maybe they are in middle age and their body's metabolism has changed and they've put on some extra weight and they just can't seem to get it off. All of these people fall into the category of some type of disordered eating pattern. So if that applies to you, please stay tuned. I'm going to be interviewing some fabulous people in this series who will definitely give you some great ideas and tips in order to make peace with food and your body. I am so excited about today's episode where I will be interviewing Louise Green of Big Fit Girl. Louise Green is an award-winning plus-size trainer, athlete, and activist working to change the narrative around body size and the idealistic standards often found in our fitness culture. She's the author of Big Fit Girl and Fitness for Everyone, and the creator of the fitness app and online coaching community Big Fit Girl. Louise is also the founder of the Size Inclusive Training Academy, where she educates health and fitness professionals on how to be more size inclusive. I'll have all of this in the show notes. And welcome, Louise.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. I've been really excited about this interview. So as I start with all of my guests, I'm curious, and I'm sure listeners and watchers are very curious about your own personal story, which led you to the work you're doing.
So my personal story it kind of began through my 20s, where I was really entrenched in diet culture.
Yeah.
And so every Monday morning was a start over. There were very brief periods in my 20s where I would have what I would consider weight loss success, but it never lasted. And so I kind of lived in this attempt and failure cycle that went on for about a decade. And during that attempt and failure cycle, I joined a run clinic here in Vancouver in attempts to really try to lose more weight, thinking that runners are skinny. If I do that, that'll be the final thing that'll work for me for sure.
Right.
What happened is I went to this group and this woman stood before us and introduced herself as our run leader. And as I turned to gaze to her, she had a body that looked like mine. She was
Wow.
a larger bodied fitness professional. And this was before the times of social media where there was very prevalent. We couldn't just go search hashtags to see body positivity. It wasn't a thing. fitness magazines certainly were not representing larger bodies. So this woman literally was the first representation of somebody in fitness leadership in a larger body. And she was the first woman that I'd ever met in a larger body that wasn't trying to lose weight.
When was this, Louise?
This was in probably around 2004.
Okay.
So that's kind of when my consistent fitness journey started. And so I trained
How
with
refreshing. Isn't that lovely? That's so lovely. Where did this woman come from? She was an angel.
I know. She was at the running room and she was a volunteer leader. And as soon as I saw her, all my kind of fear and trepidation kind of melted away. And it just allowed me to focus on being an athlete. And that's what she treated us like, was athletes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she never talked about bikini seasons coming or how many calories we expended or any kind of verbiage that kind of supports that smaller body is better.
Yeah.
And she would talk to us about athleticism and digging deep and, you know, working with the body that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never been in any kind of fitness space in my life until that point that approached fitness from a kind of weight neutral position.
Yeah.
And that's the pivotal point of my life that turned everything around.
I just want to say for a second there that I had a woman on, Jill Moran, who she's a yoga instructor, and she teaches, it's called XL yoga. And she told a similar story of one woman that changed her life forever. And I guess the key point, the highlight I want to do here is just that it takes only one person to change our whole self-image sometimes, and how powerful that can be. And in your personal story, this is true as well.
Absolutely. And that's why I've really got into advocacy of representation, because if you never see somebody that looks like you, up until that point, I was scared that I wasn't going to be able to do it, that I would be the slowest, that I would be left behind, because there was no visual proof that people like me did this. There was no relatability anywhere that I could see in the visual landscape that lend to me that this was a possibility. So meeting her was very profound and pivotal. I continued to train with her. I did the 5K, I completed that. And, you know, I went on to do many other 5Ks and 10Ks, and it kind of just spun off into like this athletic career where up until that point, I had been working in the film and television industry as a talent agent.
Oh, interesting.
So I was the person that was on the other side of the desk that would give producers notes saying the producer thought that maybe you needed to slim down. You know, like these were the type of notes that I was delivering to these beautiful people on the other side of my desk. And as I was on the weekends running with Chris, was her name, and then going into the office and kind of working in this industry that was very aesthetically driven, I started to have this feeling of this isn't reconciling for me anymore. This isn't working. And so I left. You
couldn't fit those two things together.
No, they no longer, like, when you know better, you do better. I think that's an Oprah saying. And
I think it's actually Maya Angelou.
Oh, is it?
I think so, but don't quote me.
No, you're probably right. I think Oprah says a lot of Maya Angelou.
She's a big fan.
Quotes. Yeah. Whoever said it was brilliant, because, you know, that's what started to happen to me, is that I was like, this isn't right. Like, this doesn't feel good. And I can't be party to this anymore.
Beautiful.
So I left and I started my fitness business, which was dedicated to the plus size community. And that was in 2007. I opened it up.
Okay.
And it's
and what did it look like then, Louise? What did you do?
So back in 2007, I opened up a plus size boot camp down the street.
Cool.
I still live like blocks away from where it all started. And it was a boot camp. So it was a boot camp that offered a lot of adaptations and variations for people that had different abilities in how their bodies could move. I was a brand new trainer. I had no fitness experience. So I was just terrified doing this, but I knew that it needed, that there was a need. And on the first day that I opened my business, I had a call from a national newspaper saying that I advertised on Craigslist. This is where
Okay.
people learned about my program.
SEO 101.
Yeah. And I got a call from a national newspaper saying, we find this really interesting that you exclusively, because I use the word exclusive, and that the media really wanted to tap into that,
Yeah.
exclusively for plus size people. In other words, if you didn't fit that body type, it wasn't
Yeah.
for you. Now it flipped the switch on what the plus size audience is typically feeling when they go into spaces, is that sure, you might say it's welcoming for all, and especially back then, but it really wasn't designed for bigger bodies. So
Okay.
I flipped it and created a space that was specifically designed for this audience. And so the national newspaper came out and did like a front page spread, and I got contacted from all over the country saying, is this coming to our community? And I realized in that moment that so many people need a safe place to
It
move.
was a need. It was a huge need, gaping hole that
Yeah.
needed to be filled. And you did that. That's fantastic, Louise. Good on you. Wow.
So that's how it started.
Okay, that's wonderful. And yeah, we'll get into okay. So I'm just, a question came to mind, and I'm thinking people listening to this or watching this might be thinking, how did you adapt it to plus size people? Why was it not suitable for people that weren't plus size? What were the adaptations what did your plus size folks need that was different?
So it wasn't that smaller bodied people couldn't have come and done what we were doing. It was that once that there were smaller bodied people in the mix, it felt like it wasn't as safe for people. So
yeah,
I would get the odd person that would say, look, I don't fit the demographic of what you're advertising, but I have had, a really fraught relationship with movement, and I've had some disordered situations, and I'm terrified to go into these spaces. And those people, so there were a few people that were in smaller bodies, but what the adaptations were, the first on the onset was just language around this is a safe place for you to listen to your body. So
listen to, see, just right there, listen to your body.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's not a message you get in a lot of fitness classes.
And things like, if you can't, or if you struggle to get up and down off the floor, we're going to offer every exercise to you from a standing position. So
oh, cool.
I was teaching my course last night and we were covering that topic. There's a lot of assumptions in fitness spaces that everybody's able-bodied.
Right.
They're, everybody has the ability to just get down onto the ground and jump back up. Yeah. Everybody has the ability. I mean, when we're dealing with larger bodies, there's different spatial differences that affect the way a body will move. For example, in a forward fold, if there's belly abundance, there's, that forward fold isn't going to be as accessible. So how are we forward folding? In deadlifting, in bent over rows? And there's a lot of different types of movements where just not having the knowledge of how the spatial differences are in larger bodies, you're doling out exercises and saying to people, that's not the correct form, or that's not good form. But good form and correct form is subjective, and it's actually based on a thin body experience.
Wow. So it kind of reminds me of, in the medical model, for example, like all the studies done on, health tend to be done on men, and I think maybe that's slowly changing, but it's not representative of women's biology or experience. So it sounds like a similar kind of theme.
It's just really having the lived experience awareness about, this is the other thing that I teach in the course, is really understanding if you're not living in a larger body, you've got to learn to the best of your ability what living in a larger body feels like. And that's not just from spatial differences from doing deadlifts. That's facing weight bias on a almost daily basis where there's micro and macro aggressions towards you because of how you look.
Yeah. It's, I've heard for many years now, it's one of the last isms that we're, haven't really chiseled away at much. I mean, it's still very acceptable, I think,
Yeah.
to have weight bias. Absolutely. I mean, it's
And
really
I think it's very acceptable because the majority of the population believes that fatness is your fault.
right.
There's fault to it, right?
Yeah,
So
that you're somehow weak.
yeah, like you're just not disciplined. You just can't get it together. Can't you be like us over here? All these, and some of the worst culprits of that bias are people that work within the fitness industry. So
Yeah.
when those are the people that are who larger body people are met with when they go into the spaces, it's very difficult to sustain motivation when you're not having a good experience.
Yeah. Well, I think you're starting to answer some of my questions here so beautifully and organically. So, the next thing I was going to ask is, why do you think that people living in larger bodies are so turned off by mainstream fitness classes and programs?
Well, exactly that, because for one, the culture in of itself is extremely weight biased. So
Yeah.
we assume on many levels that when somebody's larger, that they are unhealthy, that they lack in discipline. We always assume, like, how many times do I go to the gym and people start giving me tips because they think I'm new to exercise?
Oh, really?
I've been in the business for 20 years and I'm a trainer and highly, highly specialized. I have people coming up to me all the time saying, you could do it this way, and I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of assumptions about people in larger bodies. And when you're hit with that on a daily basis, it's very off-putting. And so when we talk about how people are motivated, specifically intrinsic motivation comes from having positive experiences where you feel successful, where you feel like that was fantastic. I feel great and I want to go back.
Yeah.
When that's tread upon every time you enter a gym, or often go into a gym where people are coming up to you and, telling you that you're doing things wrong, or, being very condescending and trying to be, there's this very well-meaning condescending thing that goes on that people are like, good for you. And like there's special attention given to people in larger bodies because there's this surprise and shock that they actually might be cardiovascularly fit or have some level of strength. So it's just those micro encounters that people face, along with people not knowing how their bodies move and giving them programming that simply doesn't work for them. So they're feeling, and because so many people have such deep embedded internal weight bias, they start to blame their body as because I'm fat. It's because
internalized weight bias as well, right?
So it's coming from, the weight bias is coming from the outside, but it's also coming from
the inside. Yeah, because people have been primed since childhood to think that there's something wrong with them if they were bigger bodies.
So the entire experience is not positive, and that's why it's difficult for people to go into spaces unless we have highly trained fitness professionals that can help people move through their own internal weight bias and offer programming that works for their body.
Yeah, excellent. So along those lines, what changes do you think need to take place in the worldwide fitness community to make it more inclusive for all?
Well, that's why I spent the last year building my education. And I'm not saying it has to be my education, but we need more education. And we need the governing bodies that certify fitness professionals to get on board with those pieces of education. And they need to rework the language that's within the current textbooks. And I know that several of them that's in play right now. People are starting to recognize that there was a paradigm that we're shifting from, and it's becoming a more weight neutral paradigm for exercise professionals. And so
can you give us some samples of those words that you feel are not helpful and outdated?
Well, when I went
the language.
Yeah, when I went to become a personal trainer back in the day, and the language hasn't changed much, but things like the case studies are like Bob weighs, he's 60 pounds overweight and he has diabetes. So we have to get Bob down into his
Mhm.
whatever weight in order for
Yeah.
him to be successful.
Yeah.
Well, we know from studies that if
Yeah.
Bob is exercising, it will help manage his diabetes. We
You
also
don't
know,
necessarily need to lose weight in order to be healthy. They've proven that you can have, in a larger body and perfectly healthy if you're fit.
and also we know that weight loss through restrictive measures doesn't have a lot of like the studies that back it up just really can't.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So what happens to people often is they've lived a sedentary lifestyle and perhaps their nutrition isn't fantastic. And when they start to move their bodies, they start to feel better. They start to want to support their movement with better nutrition. And then as a byproduct, sometimes they lose weight.
Yes.
But there's a difference between a byproduct and intentional. And so when it's intentional, we're restricting our food intake. And when we're restricting the food intake, then it tends to be more of a biological backlash to starvation. Our
Right,
bodies are
which
like,
often is the gateway to an eating disorder, which is
exactly. It can get to be a very slippery slope when people
Yes.
start to see results and they're praised. So, when people have eating disorders who are highly restricting their food, we put those people into treatment and we say, hey, you have to eat. But when a fat person does that, it's praised.
Yes, that's such a good point. I want to highlight that. Isn't that a good point?
So we
Yeah.
have two sets of rules for two sets of bodies. And I think
Yes.
the goal is just to get people moving and
Right.
wanting to eat food that makes them feel good.
Right.
So-
Nourishes them, in all aspects. Yeah. I love that. Getting the food focus off of, the table, really. I mean, just not making it such a highlight, but really focusing on the exercise and feeling good. It sounds like a somatic approach.
Feeling good.
Good in your body, regardless of what that size of the body is, what shape you are. Yeah.
So we have a fitness journal that goes with our programming, and in that journal, like a lot of people are coming off of the wings of diet culture, and they're used to like 1 tablespoon of mayo, the right journaling and tracking and all of that crap.
Yeah.
What this journal is more of a, how did your nutrition make you feel today? So we know often on a Friday night, if we're ordering a pizza, like we're not going to eat a pizza typically and then go exercise. It's just that doesn't mean to say don't eat pizza. It's just that there's a time and a place. I try to coach my clients to, and I always say there isn't an athlete on any athletic stage. Well, that's probably a lie, but there shouldn't be an athlete on any athletic stage that's restricting food.
Right.
Most athletes that are, I know Olympic lifting athletes, which is what I like to choose as my sport, they're eating so much food.
Yeah,
It's not a restrictive model. It is an abundance model of nutritionally dense food.
And it's food is energy, right? It's energy fuel to do all of these amazing physical feats. Yeah.
Not to say that there's not a time to eat some ice cream. Like,
right.
I think we need to really get out of that mindset of like anybody that's, lived in the 80s and the 90s, everything's low fat.
Low fat. Now we know that was a bunch of hooey.
There's so much of it that was just total crap and we all bought into it. And, it did a lot of damage.
It did a lot of damage. Absolutely. Excellent. So my next question, what advice can you offer to someone living in a larger body who wants to improve their fitness, but is hesitant because they're afraid that they won't be able to do certain exercises or will be judged by others? So you kind of answered this right at the beginning, talking about a safe space and talking about modifying exercises and making it, larger body friendly. And you're talking about training people. Any other things you want to add to that?
Well, I want to reiterate, and I was talking about this last night to my students, that when you go to any kind of fitness space, there tends to be a hierarchy of the trainer and the fat client, let's say the larger body client.
Yeah.
And both people are kind of involved in that. The client often will feel like this person knows more than me.
So we're talking about a power differential.
A power differential, so
Yeah.
that I want people from the very first time that they start to engage with a fitness professional that you're the CEO, you're the one that's hiring, they are serving you.
I love that. I call it consumerism. You're the consumer. Yeah. And I talk about it for healthcare and therapy and all that. Yeah.
So I use an example of, if I were to hire somebody to come to my home and clean the gutters, there would not be a power differential.
No.
That person would arrive. I would be the person telling that person what I'm looking for and how this is going to work for me and what time and date and all of it. Yeah. And, you know, how I want it done. I mean, obviously they're the professionals, so they can do whatever they want when they're up there, but that's beside the point. There's no power differential. I want people to approach fitness in the same way. And I know that that takes a lot of unpacking. That takes a lot of unpacking of, you know, a lot of people that live in larger bodies come to the table with shame about their body and how it hasn't been able to perform in the ways in which they would have liked it to. So the first thing is that's not your fault. Right. That is the fault of the person that was supposed to be serving you, the organization that was supposed to be serving you. They didn't meet your needs as the CEO. They should have been fired.
That's great. Yes. Good point.
So that's what I want people to work on first before they even approach somebody. Secondly, you do need to find safe spaces, but how do you do that? And so I want you to look for words. I want you to go to the websites or the social media, and I want you to look for body size diversity, and not just body size diversity, but body ability diversity, age diversity, ethnic diversity. So when somebody is being representative across all aspects of diversity, then it's already giving us a tip off that these people care. And I teach all my students that that is the first interaction. If they're already having a negative fitness experience at your website, you've done it wrong.
Yes.
Like, it's happening before you've even met them. So
yeah. And then so how could someone clue in to the fact that it's already not working for them? Would they sort of sense into their body, like, or their emotions, like, how do I feel when I'm just reading this website? Or
well, I think a lot of people in larger bodies have felt very skeptical because there's a lot of things out there that say fitness for everyone because it's buzzy, right? Or body positive fitness because it's buzzy. And I'm going to talk about that. When you see, so those are the types of things I want you to look for in websites and social media. Fitness for everyone, body positivity, health at every size, no one gets left behind. You know, fat positive is another one. Whatever the words that resonate, that speak to you, look for those words. And then I want you to take it a step further, and I want you to contact the organization, and I want you to say, and again, remembering you're the CEO, so you have every single right to be doing this. Hi, I'm really impressed by your website. I see diversity. I see the language that really feels good to me. It says that it's body positive. Is there a way that you could explain a few different scenarios and how that is translated through the training?
I love it. Flesh it out. Give me, the particulars here. Yeah, don't just throw these words at me.
Like, I'm really looking.
Stand behind it.
How do you back it up? Is what I'm going to get into, because a lot of places can't. They throw it out there because it's buzzworthy, and it has to be able to be backed up. And do you have fitness professionals that understand how larger bodies move and how, you know, like, you're allowed to ask the questions. You're the CEO, they're there to serve you. And if there's any pause or, you know, answers that don't feel good to you, then it's move on. And I realize some people are living in smaller towns and there might be one or two gyms, and that might be more difficult. That's when you may need to move your services online and find something, because there's a lot of online professionals, but we don't want anyone to have one more negative fitness experience.
Yes.
In order for that to happen, you have to be extremely due diligence on it.
Yes, very good advice. I love that. Yeah. So I'm thinking again, what would a good answer be if someone was treating themselves as a CEO and they called the business, what would some good answers be, for example, from the fitness studio?
Yeah. So if they're like, that's a great question. How we represent body positivity in our studio is that we have a range of people that work for us that are in different size bodies, and different ages and ethnicities. And we do programming that honors everybody's body where it's at. So, we offer seated exercise for some classes. We offer, standing for those who can't get up and down off the ground. We celebrate all body sizes. We're weight neutral. We don't do any weigh and measuring or any kind of 30-day challenges that uphold thinner bodies. Anything along the lines of the people that are asking these questions, that are looking for that body positive space, they know what it feels like when they hear, like if somebody were to say something like, well, we only weigh people every 3 months, so it's not all the time.
Oh dear.
Even like right then, I'd be like, no, you don't get it. Like you don't get it. But often people in larger bodies are still entrenched in that themselves, and they're looking for that. And I can't say this enough after training literally thousands of people in larger bodies, that the real magic happens when we let go of the body weight and we just focus on the physical movement and the healthful practices.
Yeah. Excellent. This is so wonderful. I think you answered, you keep pre-answering my questions. It's just wonderful. So you've mentioned some of this already, but if you want to add to it, in your opinion and experience, Louise, what are the benefits one can experience engaging in a fitness program designed specifically for people living in larger bodies?
I think I understood the question. And what happens when you are prompted with a program that's actually designed for you and speaks your language is every time you leave the space, you feel successful.
Success.
So you feel this success and you're like, that actually was good. Like a lot of people that take my program, they're like, I can't believe it. I actually did it. And it wasn't even that bad. That's what you want to have, because especially in the onset, we're really trying to create consistency, and we're really trying. So if we're already overwhelming people with burpees and, things that just don't work for larger body people, then
plus they're just horrible for everybody who wants.
They're horrible for everybody. You're going to overwhelm people, and they will leave thinking that was really hard. I felt a bit sick and I actually didn't like it.
Right. So positive experience, a felt sense in the body of that was great, and a feeling of success, maybe a bit of mastery.
That's what I try to instill in all the trainers that I've hired over the years is I don't want one person leaving this space feeling unsuccessful. And it's our job and duty to make sure that that happens. Excellent.
So how do you feel that by engaging in fitness activities, we can learn to love what I call the skin we're in, and I come to a place of, I don't know if it's body acceptance or just being more embodied or enjoying our bodies. What are your thoughts on that?
How do we come to that place?
Through how can fitness help us to be more, I guess, comfortable in our own skin?
Well, fitness does a few different things. For one, when we physically move our bodies, we build a more of a mind-body connection to the body. So I've worked with a lot of clients that come and they say, I have no connection to my body. Like I live here.
The neck up.
This doesn't exist.
Yes.
And so when we start to connect, because literally that's what we're doing, the brain is firing
Mhm.
for the proprioceptors to the body to move, and we are having to connect with the
Yeah.
body. So
Yes.
it's a great way to get the body and the mind connection built. And through that, I believe that we start to build body trust, especially
Right.
when we start to say to ourselves, I'm going to do this exercise thing 3 days a week, and we actually do it. That
Mhm.
builds body trust,
Mhm.
and it also builds body confidence. So
Yes.
everything starts to rise up
Yeah.
when we physically move. The other thing that we were talking about last night is the power of sweat and endorphins from a mental health position.
Mhm.
So, one of the students was saying that they need to have a sweat every day
Yeah.
because it elevates the mind, it clears the mind, it makes it more positive.
Yeah.
And then I, have done a lot of reading of indigenous practices or
Yeah.
ancient practices where people sweat.
Sweat lodges.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's such a healing process
Yeah.
that we're not even realizing that we're doing, that is from thousands of years ago, where people are actually going into these caves. I mean, it's not just our indigenous North American people. If you go into like Peru and
It's
places
everywhere.
like that, it's a thing, right? And it
Yeah.
has been a thing for a long time
Yeah.
of how healing it can be for the spirit and the soul.
Yeah, and for emotion and trauma and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I have an infrared sauna. I've had it for 20 years. I do it 6 days a week minimum. I just am obsessed with it. I work out and then I go in the sauna. I just am absolutely into being, I love sweating. Sweating is my favorite.
I would love to have an infrared sauna. That sounds fantastic. Like,
It's such a nice thing after a workout.
so we've seen that throughout history, right? With like
Yeah.
steaming and sweating and
Mhm.
a lot of thing too is like endorphins, it changes our brain chemistry, but also, through speaking with many therapists throughout the years, it moves emotion. When we're
Yeah,
physical, it moves emotion
absolutely.
through us. So
Absolutely.
there's endless benefits to why
Yeah.
somebody would exercise and how it can improve their overall,
Yeah.
like the whole spectrum of health.
Yeah. And being a therapist, the mental health, I mean, the serotonin, it gets boosted by exercise. There's nothing as effective. No antidepressant on the market has ever come close to exercise in terms of effectiveness. Yeah, for well-being. So I'm just curious about your own journey with your own body acceptance, body love, appreciation of your body. Where are you at now? When you look back, you started talking about when you were in your 20s and you were on this weight loss journey. Where have you come from there till now in terms of seeing your body?
Like I think as somebody that has a presence on social media, that like it might look like I have it all figured out.
Mhm.
But I try to be as transparent as possible on that because I am still a woman living in this society.
This
And
culture.
yeah, and I still struggle some days, but not to the point where like I'm not trying to alter my body anymore.
Yeah.
One thing that I do know about my body is it's really strong, and when I feel strong, I feel extremely empowered.
Yes.
And so I'm very in tune with, like, I can be the athlete that I want to be in the body that I have right now. I don't need to be 20 pounds lighter. I don't need to be 50 pounds lighter. I can do it right now.
Can you tell the audience, because I was looking at some of your social media outlets and you were lifting a lot of weight. So what are you doing in that realm these days? Give the audience a sense of what you're doing there.
So I used to be very much an endurance athlete, so a runner, a triathlete, and I just switched over to weight training, and I really started to, that's where I felt the most powerful, is when I'm lifting weight. And then when I'm lifting really heavy weight, I just feel, it's an undescribable feeling that I feel. So I got into Olympic lifting and powerlifting. And I recently went to New Orleans to an Olympic lifting weight camp where there were 25 other women.
That's what I was looking at.
Yeah,
It looked amazing.
it was like I had just found my people. Like a lot of people there were like, nobody understands why I do this. And I'm like, I know. My mom's always like, you're gonna hurt yourself. But we were, I was probably the lightest lifter there too.
Really?
But yeah, like Olympic lifting into like a clean and jerk, 100 pounds over your head. And I just feel like those moves are just so empowering. I love it. And so, but what my Olympic lifting is to somebody might be their walking group or their swimming or their biking or dance class. And I think it's just the important thing is I don't want to portray that fitness has to be hardcore and heavy. That's what it is for me, but it doesn't have to be for you.
I just have one last question for you. Can you please share some of the stories and feedback you've received from people that you work with? So either trainers or clients that may provide hope and inspiration to those watching or listening to this. I mean, I think you've already done a lot of that. But.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients that have come and said that the way that I have coached them to approach fitness has changed their life. And it's very much like what Chris gave to me, my first running coach, is basically what my mission has been since then, is to spread the news that you don't have to hate your body and that your body isn't a limiting factor. It's actually our minds that are the limiting factor. And to your point on therapy, I've always had a therapist. I come from an addictions background. I've always been involved in a 12-step recovery. And I don't 911 my therapist. I'm not like, hey, I need it's an ongoing thing.
There's a shout out to everybody. Please don't 911 your therapist.
Well, some people do that when they're in crisis. They call
once in a while. But I like that because as a therapist, you don't want people to become dependent upon therapy either, but you want them to be empowered to be able to solve their own problems. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that there's a mental fitness component that needs to be looked after, and we are responsible for that. We're responsible for our health, and the past traumas that we've had were not our fault, but we're responsible to work through those and try to create the happiest life that we can. And so a lot of the people that I work with, back to your point, is I've helped them unpack some of those negative experiences and really turn their thinking around into empowering themselves through athletics. So one person that comes to mind right now is, her name's Sarah. She lives in the Northwest Territories, and she started with me with a 3K learn to run. She's training now for 15 kilometers.
Wow.
Wakes up at 6 a.m. every morning and runs.
Wow.
I think 5 days a week. And when we're now talking about her getting into leadership.
Wow.
So she's in a bigger body. She has not lost any weight. That isn't what it's about for her. It's about the athleticism. And she said that it's completely changed the way that she views her body.
Right. In what ways? Has she mentioned any specific?
Just, the same things as I went through, is that she's not battling her body for aesthetics anymore. It's not like I need to look a certain way. It's more about what my body can do, not what it looks like. Yeah. And with what it can do, when you keep being able to push the envelope on that, the confidence just rises up, and I don't need to be anything other than what I am today.
Oh, I love it. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Yes. That's wonderful. Louise, was there anything I should have asked you, didn't ask you? Anything you want to add?
No, I think that's it.
No, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I know that people listening to this, watching this, are going to get so much out of it, and keep doing what you're doing. You're just doing amazing work. And I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Louise.
Okay, bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, please take the time and subscribe to this channel. If you're on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and comment on what you liked about it. As well, feel free to pass this episode on to others whom you think may benefit. And of course, we always appreciate positive reviews. We would appreciate it greatly if you took the time to review this podcast or YouTube video so that others will want to check it out as well, and we can spread the word about these compassionate conversations. Thanks so much.